Hello, hello. Okay. I've been doing some really different videos lately, and I'm going to start a new painting, and for some reason I have this urge to share a lot about my process and a bit about my history as well. And I don't know why, just bear with me on this. I'm just being crazy me, right? Okay. Which has been so hard for me to do for a long time, is just kind of figure out my authenticity. And that's what this video is going to be about. And hopefully you can listen to my words here and watch what I'm doing or what I'm thinking about and take something from it in your own creative career or creative path to figure out how to be as authentic as you can be. And I want to start with this image here that you see on screen. This is in Photoshop. I'm actually recording this on OBS, and I can't, usually I can see the OBS recording, what's happening, but I have to record my entire screen. So if I show OBS, it looks like, actually it looks kind of cool. It's this window that repeats a million times over. Look at that. Whoa, craziness. Because I'm capturing my whole screen, so it's capturing OBS. Yeah, it repeats. Anyway, cool stuff. Yeah, so the past like 2 years, I've been, I think it was like April or May 23, that's 2 years ago. I was doing digital stuff, I was doing some live streams, and then all of a sudden I just kind of had this breakdown in my artwork, and I realized that I was doing things that was so influenced by everything that's not me, that I needed to just stop and find who I was and really work on that to be able to find my own, let's say style. Okay. I hate that word style because it's kind of like a stand-in for authenticity of really who you are. And what I always say about style is if you go for style, if you're like, oh, this is my style, I'm trying to find my style, you'll never find it. The way to find your style, in my opinion, or my style, in my opinion, is to look inward and find out who you are. And it's taken me 2 years to get closer to it. I'm not saying that I'm there yet, because I thought I was there a year ago. I thought I was there a year and a half ago, and then I thought I was there 6 months ago, but I'm still, layers of an onion, still figuring things out, right? And maybe I'm getting to the center of who I am, and then I will change, and then it's another different me. But one thing I was doing was looking at artwork that I did years and years ago. So this is from 1997. I was straight out of college. I went to the Art Institute of Chicago for a couple years and was up in Chicago, and then I don't know how old I was at that point. I was in my 20s, and then I moved in with my mom because I was broke, that kind of thing. And I had a job in retail that was making money, and I didn't have anything going as far as a gallery or art that I needed to show to anybody. And everything that I was doing was purely from things that I enjoyed. And it was, when I looked back at it recently, like a few months ago, I looked back at this old artwork that I had taken pictures of, really bad pictures of. And I thought, this is me back then in the 97, 96, 97, 98. Like, this was authentic me. Everything that I saw here, I could reproduce who I was then. Like, I could almost like project my own self back then, and I could feel who I was. I was like, wow, this is probably the most authentic I've ever been. I don't know what happened, but things changed, right? I got so serious with it. I got into different things, blah, blah, blah. Life happens, whatever. So I looked back at this work, I saw true authenticity, and I saw things that I still like today. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this old work. I don't want to go too much into it, but the influence here, graffiti, comic books, and some kind of messaging, some kind of weird, fun, interesting messaging. And it didn't matter the materials I was using. There's a lot of times I painted and drew on like linoleum squares. Like I found a bunch of free linoleum squares that you would put in your kitchen, and I cut them up and I was painting on those. And then traffic signs, any kind of board or whatever. Like it didn't matter. Like I was like just throwing stuff down, tape and a little bit of glue, and cutting out comic books. And I know if there's any comic book collectors listening to this, they're going, oh my God, you cut out a Spawn comic book. I know what comic that is. Sorry, dude. Art creates, right? But anyway, so I'm going to show a couple of these. And I liked them because they had interesting compositions to them, and they were really raw in a lot of ways. They have the comic book influence, a lot of comic book cutouts. I love the word bubbles. I love the words that I was using in these pieces. I love like the layering that is happening. I was like, man, this is really interesting. Like I've taped, like if I zoom in, oh my goodness, zoom in, Chris. Like I haven't used Photoshop before. Like I'm taping little word balloons there and putting word balloons from different comic strips or comic pages in there, and hopefully they kind of match up and mean something for a whole piece. It's pretty interesting. Weird colors. It doesn't have to be vertical or horizontal. It doesn't have to make sense in any way. It's just fun, just tremendously fun and authentic is what I was doing here, and just having a good time. I mean, like look at Spider-Man here, right? There's Spider-Man swooping in. Man, what a mess, he says. Well, you've had your chance. This is going to hurt me more than it is you. And it's like, yeah, I don't know what's going on here. It's fun stuff. So I look at these and I go, wow, this is super authentic. And I've been thinking about it for months and going, man, how can I bring some of this back into my work? And I'm like, do I really want word balloons? Do I really want like this kind of thing where you're telling like a comic book story? And I felt like, oh, you're not a real artist if you can't tell a story in one image, one painting. And then I'm slowly getting away from that. I'm going like, what is a real artist anyways? And I'm looking at all this abstract work, or not abstract work, all of this, yeah, abstract too, but all of this work from a multitude of artists and seeing things that they're doing and saying there's no rules anymore. I can do whatever I want. I could do crazy stuff. I could break up a figure into small shapes. I can disseminate the figure into just a tiny bit of brushstrokes like Anne Gale does. I could do big blocky shapes like Zoe Frank does, and huge amazing compositions. I could do abstractions like Rothko. I could flatten the figure out with super thick paint and just not worry about drawing like Freud does. I could do anything. There's all these possibilities. And recently, actually, I was looking at this magazine, Daria, Daria, which is Denver Art Review, Inquiry, and Analysis. That's a long stream of words. Basically, it shows, what's going on in Denver, Colorado, because I'm living in Colorado now. And there is I don't know if you could see this. I have no idea if you can, but there's an artist on here that is breaking up their art in these panels, kind of like comic books. And it's landscape, and it's telling a wonderful story. Actually, the artist name is Ash Eliza, Eliza Williams. And their show is called Language Without Words, and they communicate so well. And I'm like, if she does it, I can do it. I can do it. And then I'm thinking about other things as well. So I go, one of my favorite comics ever. And I remember when this came out, it blew my mind. It blew everybody's mind. So this is a page from Alex Ross's comic book series called Kingdom Come. And he's painting in gouache comics. Like, it's unheard of. He's doing real paintings. And what I love is this way of storytelling where you can have a full figure and then this just kind of zoom in on like a certain part. And I'm like, man, that's really nice. And it's a little bit different than traditional comics, which has like kind of a white background and these panels on it, and then everything is outlined in white. And I was like, you know, I kind of like how he does it, where everything flows together a bit more. Here's another one from the Kingdom Come series. You can see how this comic book page is broken up and telling a story, but in kind of a broken line, like you've torn pieces of the comic book apart. And instead of being these perfect blocks and rectangles, it's more of a slash. And, you know, it makes sense. Like he's thinking, this is action oriented. Why would I slow it down with, or make it more still with rectangles? No, I'm going to do these slashes, these broken slashes at an angle and keep it more action packed. And I'm like, yes, he's thinking about the entire thing in storyline, and he's breaking away from even comic books. And I was like, oh, that's really cool too. I love that, you know, as a story thing. And then, you know, oh, you can't do that in a painting. Yes, I can. I could do it anytime, anything I want, right? We've already talked about that. I could show you a million artists that do just, you know, what you would call maybe weird things that are hanging in the most prestigious galleries everywhere, or, you know, selling their work for millions of dollars or whatever. I don't know, but doing really well or doing amazing work. Here you go. Just different ways of telling the story. This is Spawn, I think, maybe the very first book. This is Spawn as well. I always loved the way that they did. Oh my goodness, Chris, why are you zooming in so far? I love the way that McFarlane would do these word balloons, how they're kind of broken up, how, you know, you have these, and this is kind of the traditional way where every section is laid out with, divided with white lines, right? Which is really interesting. And then you have an element like the earth here, which is kind of breaking outside of that and creates like this sense of depth. And I was like, oh, well, that's really cool. I like that too. I like that idea. Like the layering of this, like I can break that dimension. And then I'm also thinking about influences that I've had in the past with the way that I render a lot of my older paintings and things like that. And actually, excuse me, I'm going to bring up an older painting. Oh geez, what year did it had to be like 21 that I did that. I'm looking for a self-portrait that I did of myself to no, it was 2018, because that was, here it is. So this is a painting called Who Is This? Post-Kidney Transplant. So it's me. This is not the greatest image of that painting. Oh my gosh, the detail is terrible on it. But this is the way that I was rendering skin and flesh tone at the time. And I loved all the colors in here. It's just like, it goes to purples and yellows and greens. And there's no evidence of brushwork. I like that too. There's brushwork there, but it's more blotchy in a lot of ways. Okay, I like that. And I remember I was influenced by Robert Liberace within that. And then I'm also influenced by, let's show Patrick off. I can zoom in on this one. Maybe you'll see not a great photo. Let me find another one that's in kind of the same vein of art. Here we go. Vulnerability. This will be really high quality, I think. Okay. So this is called Vulnerability 3, is a painting I did. Oh, look, a cat hair right there. I've got cats. That's Kitty. He isn't alive any longer. Oh, Kitty. Immortalized you in my painting. So fantastic. But you can see the brushwork on here, like highly influenced by someone like Van Gogh, you know, where I'm injecting a lot, or trying to inject action and energy into the body with multi-layered strokes. You know, I'm not trying to do like a John Singer Sargent or Sorolla and describe that arm in just a minimal amount of strokes. Like this hand here is just broken in a lot of places, and I love the energy within that. And an artist, a wonderful artist that I look up to that I just said earlier, Anne Gale. Look at this. So there's an influence there. It's probably more influenced by Anne Gale than Van Gogh. But you can do this. I mean, her work is just absolutely amazing. Just gorgeous, gorgeous work. Look at this. Like, you can do this, people. Isn't this just absolutely beautiful? Just mind-blowingly fantastic. So looking at those influences, and then I'm looking also at Robert Liberace. This is a terrible image of one of his amazing paintings, and how he kind of renders skin in different ways. Can I get a higher resolution photo? This is probably a little bit better. Higher, there has to be a better one. Nope. All just terrible images. That's okay. That's okay. I can describe it, but kind of like you don't see defined brushstrokes. They're there, but the way that he works the paint into the panel or the canvas he works on is he kind of smushes it around. So there's not clear edges with every single brushstroke, if that makes sense. Another thing that I'm more influenced by, and even with this terrible image, you can kind of see it here, where he does this after image of the movement of the body. You can see it better in other ones. This is more extreme of that, where he has the hand and arm in two different places. One's kind of faded out. I've always loved that. It really shows a lot of movement. Not only that, I mean, his way of describing form through value and color, how it's warm, and then he transitions to these cool tones here, and then just super thin, like that's just canvas and maybe a little bit of burnt umber to show that reflected light in the shadow. Just absolutely gorgeous, right? Here's another example of the after image everywhere around the body. I love that to show motion. This one's fantastic. Like you can feel the sheet being thrown around, like that movement there. Just love that sense of movement. And this is something that comic books do a lot. They're trying to show movement within each panel, or they'll do different things to show action in a lot of ways. Super influenced by that. I mean, this is fantastic. One of the things that you'll see all the time, and he's a very traditional artist, looks at the old masters all the time. One thing you'll see all the time with Baroque old master paintings is in the light areas, it's very warm colors, reds, oranges, things like that. And then as you move to shadow, greens and blues and grays and things like that, just absolutely gorgeous. And then he's got even these crazy, kind of pinkish colors in the very light side. Just amazing. But I love the movement within everything, and I can't see everything else. Okay. So I'm looking at these influences that I have, and I'm like, I love this. I've done this before. I want to pull some of that into the way that I do paintings. And because I've looked at the paintings that I've done in the past, and I'm like, the way I do it is different than Liberace, right? The way, that I do, everything should be different than Liberace. I'm trying to do that in a lot of ways. But it's all based in kind of going back to this person where I'm just really freely expressing myself as much as I can without worrying about, is someone going to buy it? Can the gallery show it? That kind of stuff, and really some authenticity. So let's get into, that's what's leading up to this painting I want to do. And we'll go to this image. So this is a figure reference from, I'll show you the website. And yes, I've blocked out some nudity in here because this is going to be on YouTube, and I don't know if they'll block my video if I show nudity or something. And I'm not sure if what I'm showing here is no good. But anyway, There's some fantastic resources out there. This is satinezillah.com, satinezillah.com. And they have just a ton of photo references, just of figures, mostly figures. You see, you got snakes and landscapes and all kinds of stuff, dressed people and armor, and just amazing, amazing, amazing things to look at. But this image is from there. It's from the Back Anatomy series. It only costs like $11 for something like 400 pictures. Beautiful lighting. But I saw this, or at least the reference pack, and I was like, yes, I need to work from this. I'm just so motivated. It's just gorgeous, gorgeous lighting on this. And probably the one thing that really got me here was, and I want to show you this. This is amazing. If I do a color picker, like I'm in Photoshop, I choose the color picker thing, and then I got this little color picker on the canvas that I can roll around, and I can kind of see what colors are made up of here. And I'm looking at this one area on this person. And as I'm color picking and I'm rolling this through, if you look at your color swatch on the side, which this has the full color wheel. Like if I wanted greens or blues or pinks or purples or whatever, I can go to them, right? As I'm moving this all the way through the figure, it stays within the gray area. Now, if you look at this color picker, if you're familiar with Photoshop, you probably already know this, but everything to the left, on the left side, is complete gray. Like if I pick this out, this is as neutral as you can get. Neutral meaning there's no saturation of hue. Okay, it's black and white and gray, and that's it. If I go to the far right, it's as much saturation as possible. So this is like a super saturated orange with a mid value range. This is super saturated orange with the highest value range possible, and then black, but super saturated. And you can kind of divide this in the center. Everything on the left is more neutral, it gets into the more neutral. Everything on the right gets more saturated. But if I looked at this figure without doing this, without actually doing a color picker of this, I would say, you know what? That's probably a good combination of, I don't know, cadmium red and maybe some yellow ochre, right? And a little bit of white. Okay, for maybe this part of the glutes. Okay. And I would be so wrong, because when I'm going here into the glute, look how gray this is. This color is, there's nothing to it. It's almost all the way to the side of being gray. And I could do this over the entire figure, only in places like, especially in shadow. This is really interesting. Like I know that there's a cool light, cool as in closer to blue. Okay, if you think about Kelvin, probably 6,000, 5,500 Kelvin, right, is hitting the right side of this figure. And I know this because when I'm color picking, it's gray. It's in a gray tone because you have warm skin tone, Caucasian, female, pale skin tone is still pretty warm. Not as warm as me right now. But then you got a cool light, and it's going to turn to gray because you got the cool light mixing with the local color of the skin. Like, actually, I could even change the color of this light. Can I? That is on me right now. Is that working? No, that's not working. Oh, this way. There you go. I don't know if you can see this, but like now I have a very blue light on me, so I'm probably a bit more gray looking, but then I can warm it up. Nope, that's brightening it up. I can warm up this light all the way, so I'm like super warm, kind of orange, right? Anyway, so you have those two things. So I know that that's a cool light because as I mouse over it, it's turning to gray. So that's a good thing that you can kind of learn. And then as I go into shadow, it goes down in value. You see how it's this little picker thing on the color picker. It's dipping down in value, still staying kind of gray. But now it's going a bit more into the saturation. And then as, you know, I'm on the side of this person's body and I'm going into shadow, we start getting saturated. Interesting. Cool light, warm shadows. It actually happens here. Doesn't happen everywhere. It's not a set, you know, super rule or anything, right? So let's try it again. Like on this arm, if I go to the lightest part of this arm, we're into the grays, and let me move into the shadow, it gets warm and saturated, okay? If I stay in the shadow, warm and saturated. I get right around this elbow. Now we're changing to red rather than orangey color. Down here, grayish kind of color. Oh, on the pads of the feet, like the heel here, look, the darkest part of that heel, we get very saturated. Really, really interesting. And probably the most saturation is here in the ear. If I move this around, look at that, super saturated because it's, what do they call it? Specular lighting, where you're like, it's lit from behind. So you get the light coming through the flesh and it's making it super saturated. So like, that's the most saturated place. Everything else, pretty much grays, just a crazy amount of grays. And if you've watched my previous videos, or maybe it was one big video, because it was multiple days that I put in one video, I created a whole palette based on just what I wanted to achieve in this area. Actually, the whole thing. It's a different Zorn palette, and it's titanium white, Payne's gray to be able to get a lot of these really cool bluish grays, right? Yellow ochre as my yellow, you know, very subdued, warm, grayish yellow, right? And then burnt sienna. And that's the warmest I can get. That's the reddest I could get would be burnt sienna. And as I'm mousing around on this heel here, their heel, I feel like that's Payne's gray, burnt sienna. I think so. But then I did the color chart, which is right behind me on my desk. I think, well, on my art table. It's pretty blown out right now. You can't really see the light, I think, on that. But as I look at some of those colors, I was able to make this saturated color with burnt sienna and a little bit of Payne's gray. Yep. So this was the impetus for me creating that entire palette chart, color chart for that whole palette. There's a lot leading into this, right? Okay. So remember all the other influences, the artistic influence, artistic influence. Oh my God. The comic book influence, the word bubbles, the blah, blah, blah. And this is how I work. The whole thing is how I work. So I bring this photo into Photoshop. I'm looking at colors. And then I look into like composing, and I chop things up. And I also think about what size is this going to be? This is another thing I think about. I don't like working large. This is a piece of paper. This is Arch's oil paper, and I think the size that I have is 12 by 16. So a whole figure on 12 by 16, if I do that, the eyes, or the whole head of this figure, if I put it on this sheet of paper, is going to be 1 inch tall. And if you've ever tried to paint features in 1 inch, you're down there with like a little tiny brush, just super tiny brush going in super detail. And I'm like, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. I can do that. I've done it before. I just don't want it. So I'm thinking about that, thinking about how do I need to crop this so that I can make the figure as big as possible. You know, other things that I loved about this was how the shadow in the background here kind of follows the contour of the back. I'm like, yes, I love that. How the light has kind of been cut off here, and there's that. I even love the whites and grays down here with this foam. It's pretty interesting substrate to put a model on. Really, really interesting. There's a car outside. So yeah, I'm loving a lot of this. So let's look at the composition I came up with all of those influences. And you know, I'm telling you this right now. I really didn't want to show this. Like there's this urge in me, and I think in every artist out there, where they're like, you know what? I don't want to show my process. I want to keep it so secret because I want it to be special and the special thing. And so people, you know, will think, oh, how did he do this? how did it happen? And, you know, I'm pulling back the curtain and I'm revealing everything, right? I'm revealing everything. And that's bad. You don't want to do that. You want art to seem like this magical occurrence, and that you're so talented that you were born with it and only you could do it. Anyway, I'm opening the curtain on everything. So I can turn off these layers too to kind of show you, except for the censoring. I will censor that part. I love painting nudes. I like nude figures, but the world isn't caught up to me yet. And a lot of other people. But anyway, even though Michelangelo did it, it's okay. It's okay. Still got problems with it. Anyway, it's another topic. So you can see how I cropped the figure. I even turned this a little bit. It made it a little bit more dynamic. Got rid of most of the head, but wanted to keep all the figure. I was thinking, what is this about? Like, if I'm just painting this figure, what is it about? And it's exactly what I saw before, right in the glutes area, this huge section of color. And I also want to think about value structure. If I look at the difference between these values, between where the figure ends and the background begins, there's not a lot of difference. It's here to here. That's it in the color picker. And I'm like, you know what? That's a perfect place for a lost edge. Let's gray out the figure even more into the background, lose a lot of the figure and a lot of that. And I was like, man, that sounds really interesting. Then I was thinking, I feel like this figure is trying to get away from something, you know, and I'm calling it escape. It's actually called escape because there's a movement away. Like there's something off screen that's scaring the crap out of her or something like that. Something that not her, they need to get away from. Okay. And that's what I want to go for. Like, as far as like visual concerns, I'm looking at the glutes as the center. I'm looking at grays for the figure and kind of the blending in, another part of like escaping and fading away. Let me get away from things. Okay. Kind of has a little bit to do with my previous painting about pain, trying to get away from the pain, that kind of thing. So I'm thinking about that as far as the story, the narrative within this as well. And then I'm thinking Liberace. So this is from, this leg is from another picture in that series, that reference pack. And I'm thinking, I'm just going to throw this here. I'm not going to paint it exactly like it is there. I had some other layers that I was playing around with that I ended up turning off because I didn't think that they were working. Like this one here, different foot position. I think that foot was like the exact same position. And I was like, no, I don't need that. I tried this one as a different foot position. I was like, that doesn't really work well. Not at all. And so I just went with the leg there, and I left some other aspects of that, like some of this like random gray in there to remind me of action oriented and movement. And I'll think about, Robert Liberace and how, especially in these portions where there's a faded, like there used to be a figure in this part, that leg was back there and now it's up here, thinking about that. So I can reproduce that in paint, or I think I can. I'm going to try and reproduce it in paint so I don't need it exactly on here. And then bringing in the comic book influence. Like I wanted that head, I wanted the face, I wanted the eyes, and I think I'll move the irises. So instead of the person looking out away, that they're looking directly right. And it doesn't really take much to move the irises. You do have to pay attention to where the dips in the eyelids are, because that's really important. But just moving it so they are looking out in some way. And this is from the original photo, and I just blew it up because if I think I've changed this image size, so 15.5 by 6.5 is the size I'm going to paint it. And if I do M for whatever tool this is called, what is this called? Rectangular thing. and I look at the size of this eye and I make a square over it, I can see that it's, you know, 3/4 of an inch. And I'm like, okay, 3/4 of an inch just for the eyeball. I can work with that. I can make features in this amount of space. Okay. So 5x2. And I like how it's bold. I like how it's up front. It's overlapping the leg, both legs in a lot of ways. And then, you know, looking at this face here, like just looking at the lips, this is going to be hard because that's super tiny. This is, the lips are 1/4 of an inch, just super tiny. So that's, am I going to worry about detail over there? No, not going to worry about detail. But I love the, like, this other way of telling a story of looking at the eyes. Like I've cut off the eyes on the figure because we don't need them. They're there. I can do that because comic books have done it, and I can be an artist and I can be as authentic as I want to be on this and do weird, crazy stuff. Almost use the S word there. I could do the weird stuff, okay? Because I like it. And then I'm like, you know what? To heck with it. I'm going to put a word balloon in here. I am going to put a word balloon in. It's going to come directly from first issue of Spawn. And I don't know if those words are really right, though. Maybe I'll look for other word balloons, but I like the size of it. I like, we'll see. And I really like this idea of like, oh yeah, I could draw a word balloon like that. I could paint it similar and I could put my own words on there. But I love sourcing it directly from the comic. You know, for some reason, I'm like, I really want to pull it directly from the comics. Why am I like that? I don't know, but I am. Okay. I don't know. And you know, that's what I want to do. I mean, I can't even describe it. I mean, think about it in this way. Right now, the word balloon says, I don't belong. There's a context. You're thinking, okay, this figure's here. She looks like she's getting away from, or they look like they're getting away from something. And the word balloon says, I don't belong, but the name of the piece is called Escape. Okay. Trying to escape from some place that they don't belong? Pretty interesting. Okay. So we're telling a story there. But what if I changed it to another balloon? Now there's darkness in my soul. Maybe it says that. Or I want to die. Or I have to get back there. These are all words from the comic book. You know, they have completely different meaning here. Maybe the bet was rigged. He made me believe. You know, imagine that being on the piece, like right down there. Like what kind of story, a narrative would that tell? It'd be completely different. Completely, utterly different. So it matters and it's interesting. And I like the shape that's in, the kind of crazy shape. There was some other shapes that Spawn used for word balloons and to separate panels, and it was really kind of, it looked like just ink splatter edges. It was kind of crazy cool. Anyway, so for a long diatribe, you know me, I talk like crazy all the time. This is how I arrived at this painting. And that what I'm going to do next is I'm going to stop recording here, and you can see my art table in the background. That's where I do my painting. I'm going to set up my camera and I'm going to start drawing this out on this piece of paper. Hopefully it goes well. I have no idea how it's going to end up, but I'm super excited because this feels really fun. This feels so fun and so not different from me. It's like closer to me. It's closer to me. Yeah. Okay. I can stop talking now. So I'm going to cut this off and I'll see you in the other place. Okay. Here we are. Here we are at the art table. It's really, this brown here, this wood is a drafting table. It's like, I don't know, an antique drafting table that you can buy at Home Depot for like, I think it was $180. Pretty darn nice. I used to paint, and I've showed some videos before, they're on like a pochade box on a tripod, but doing something this big on that, it gets really shaky and it wasn't really working. So I bought this mainly because I want to be just like Nicholas Uribe. He's my hero. He's pretty awesome. And he paints on a table like this. I hope he watches this video and goes, oh my gosh, this guy, I need to not talk to him anymore. He's going to start stalking me or something like that. Anyway, so here we are. This is Arches oil paper, and I have gessoed it with a gray gesso. You can't really buy gray gesso that I know of. I just have white gesso and black gesso that I mix together, and I make a gray that's pretty similar to the palette color. Kind of similar, but close enough, right? So that I could, when I move my colors from here to here, they're easier to understand. And I didn't sand this. Sometimes I will sand it after I gesso it to smooth it out, but I'm going to try and deal with the texture this time. Why do I sand it? Because when you're dealing with really small detail, like even though I blew up those eyes, it's going to be here, the eye is still going to be pretty small. Yeah, but we'll see. Maybe I'll draw it bigger. I don't know. And it's going to be hard dealing with that detail, but I'm going to go for it. I like painting small. Look how big this is. Not that big. It's 15.5 wide by 6.5 tall. And I leave a 1/2 inch or as much as I can on the outside here so that I can tape it to my drawing board. And also, if you've watched my panel making video, you can see that part of the reason why leaving this is for making panels and stuff like that, even though I'll go over these lines when I paint. And the reason for that's in the panel making video. But it's really nice to have that extra edge, because when the painting's wet and you don't want to touch it, you can still pick up the painting and, you know, tack it to places, because you have this extra edge where if you touch it, you're not going to mess up the painting in any way. It's easier to kind of move around and things like that. So materials, if you watched my color chart video, you can see that it's up here. I have it above. I'm not going to pull it down because it's all taped up there. I'm going to be using that as reference for this entire painting. And I have to the left my iPad, my tablet, with the image on it. And the first thing I'm going to do is, oh my gosh, I put my pencil away. That's good. You got to draw and you're going to put your pencil away. Now, I usually just go straight in to drawing with ink, like just a crappy ink pen, but I'm a little scared of having to make a ton of corrections with this whole figure here, because I'm not using any grids or nothing. So I'm going to go back to graphite. This is cheap old mechanical graphite pencil with any lead in it, doesn't matter, and then a kneadable eraser just in case. But honestly, I think the back, you know, this eraser works better on this surface rather than the kneadable eraser. And that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna draw this out. I won't be getting to painting today. Hopefully I can get to painting tomorrow on this. I don't like spending tons of days on a painting. I lose motivation and interest and energy on the painting the longer I spend on it. But yeah, I'm super excited. So I'm gonna stop talking and start speeding this up right now. Alrighty then, a couple thoughts that I want to speak about with the drawing. That took me about 30 minutes to get through this much of the drawing. And as you can see, there's not a lot of detail. I mean, I'm not getting into the toes here. This foot is super wonky. I need to do some fixing there. I didn't even attempt to get into detail on this foot. This is going to be kind of like an extra leg motion thing. I didn't get into detail on the head at all. Just kind of, you know, the shape, and that's it. Or at least the face here. I got more detailed here. I moved the iris, well, this, what do you call that? The pupil or whatever. I moved that to the right, so this person is looking out. I want there, you know, kind of the back and forth, this horizontal movement happening. Got into detail there. But for the most part, this is all really simplistic because I wanted to make sure that I didn't fly the figure off the page. And I know, and when I draw the figure, I'll start here, and then as I work out, I get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger with all these shapes, and then all of a sudden, you know, the feet are 3 times the size of the head, and I'm way off the page, and, you know, my composition is wrong, you know, or screwed or whatever. And I did that a little bit here. That foot is too far out, I think. I'm not sure where I screwed up, so I need to figure that out at some point. I'm gonna kind of fade this out some so that it's a reminder to work on that, because the one thing you don't want to happen on one of your paintings is, you know, I'm really happy with this drawing here, it looks really good, I'm happy with here, but that foot is so bad that everybody goes there, and bad and good is subjective. So, you know, whatever you feel bad is, someone else may look at it and go, I didn't notice anything wrong with the foot at all. But for me, it isn't like everything has to be absolutely perfect, but it shouldn't distract away from the focus, right? So maybe the drawing is so unresolved, which it is now, that it's pulling away from the narrative of everything else. Okay. Now, when my suggestion, you know, this is going into drawing fundamentals and things like that. When you're drawing the figure, you're going to find all kinds of beautiful curves, like this curve here up into the leg, and now it curves over. It's just beautiful curves. Try to ignore that as much as possible. For example, there's this curve here from the ankle all the way into the top of the leg. Like here's the calf that's kind of sticking out, and there's this really nice curve that happens here and down. But when I initially drew that, I ignored that curve and just did a straight line. I can come back and make that a bit more curvilinear. What's most important is that you get where the limb is going first, kind of get the general idea and shape down, and then go back in and add those curves in different places. Like this ankle is sticking out. It's absolutely gorgeous how it sticks out here. There's like so many attachments of muscles and things that happen there. And how it sticks out, and then all of a sudden it kind of drops down and then goes into the top of the foot here, and then it disappears and you're into the side of the foot. So that whole thing, like I could spend hours and hours rendering this out and making it look just absolutely exact with the photo. But generalizing right now is enough, okay? Work on, like if you're struggling with drawing the figure, try and turn everything into just sharps, you know, sharp edges, sharp angles, things like that, to just get the placement down for the figure, and a general idea of location, thickness, thinness, how it travels through space, things like that. And then go back in and add in like, you know, the epicondyles of the radius and ulna, or one of those two there, or how the shadow is cast within these small extensor muscles, right? Or flexors, I don't know which one, I'm making stuff up, is right there. Shadows cast in some way. The bulge of the forearm, how it just flows into the wrist here, but then there's this huge vein that kind of pops out right there. You know, all those curves, you can deal with those contours a little bit later. But most important is to turn that line into like a very straight line. Same thing with the leg here, or the thigh. There's all kinds of curves and things happening within this. It goes down and then up and then down again, and then the glute falls off this piece of foam, and you got that little bump that happens. It's absolutely gorgeous, but the initial, to get it in the right place, straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line. That's really helpful. It's helped me to understand form and the figure a lot better, to simplify it first, and then to get into things like toes and noses and mouths and ears and ankles and all the little bits. There are a few parts, like for instance, I was working on the lumbar spine back here, and this particular figure, she has these two, hopefully you can see that, these two dots. So this is the posterior superior iliac spine area. So you got the sacrum that kind of makes this wonderful point down here, probably goes down a lot further, I'm not sure. And then you have your iliac crest that goes up here where the hips are, and there's this nice little box and everything. But these two little dots here indicate the back, like it is the back of the figure. And so you know that that has a particular plane. So it was those were really important with telling the story, with the flatness of that back, and that would go further into giving me information on indicating where the side ended and the back began, okay, or the side ended and the front began, that kind of thing. So those 2 points. So a little bit of anatomy is super helpful in a lot of ways. Honestly, most of the time, I don't use the anatomy that I know. It's just in certain moments where I'm like trying to figure things out, and then my anatomy knowledge training comes in and I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. That's the front and that's the side, or that's the side, that's the front, that's the bottom, that's the top. I mean, the purpose of anatomy is not for you to draw anatomically correct studies all the time. The purpose of anatomy is to give you a better understanding of how to draw forms of the figure in space, and to be able to look at something like a calf here that is so round and hard to understand. Look at the little bits and pieces of anatomy that you can understand, like within this leg, this foot, and then be able to draw it better in some way. So it just provides some more understanding in a lot of ways. Like the back of the foot here, it's so gorgeous, but I just haven't figured that out yet. The ankle, I see both sides of the ankle. So wonderful. And see, I'm kind of off here on the calf. The calf is larger. Now, I could go into crazy grid mode, and I could grid out this whole thing and then grid out the image and then make sure my drawing is correct and blah, 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 doing all that. I used to do it before. But one of the things that I've changed into, or really made a decision to do, is to live with the intricacies that I see and the differences that I see, and understand that, you know, if I make something bigger, like if the glutes area are huge, it's because I felt like maybe they need to be larger. This foot, I feel like needs to be larger. I'll probably paint it a bit larger. It doesn't have to be as perfect as the image. And I'm really getting away from that because the image is beautiful. The image is gorgeous. It's done. It's done. I don't need to speak anymore about how gorgeous that image is. I'm telling a different story here that's utilizing the information inside of that image. And that's what's most important. What's most important is expressing my view on things. And I'm just going to make that foot bigger. And this big toe, I love the big toes, how they kind of give you a lot of information about the foot. And that might go off. I don't know if I like that. Oof. I think I'm going to have to work on that one. So yeah, draw without grids is what I'm doing now. Now, I did gridding for a long time to make sure that I got the figure right on, but that came along with tons of drawing freehand without any grids from a live model. I'm doing a bunch of life drawing right now that I'm running here in Colorado, in Pueblo, Colorado. So if you want to do life drawing in Pueblo, Colorado, look us up. Yeah, at the Arts Alliance in Pueblo, Colorado. Be kind of cool. Meet somebody that saw my video from YouTube. But anyway, I digress because I ramble. And why I'm drawing a nose here while I'm trying to talk, I have no idea. Don't touch that while you're trying to talk, Chris. But yeah, if it's off in some way, that's my influence on the image. It doesn't have to be perfect. If I continually go for perfect, you know, what am I doing? My purpose in life is to as an artist is to reproduce an image and make it look like the image. Oh, it's just like the picture. It looks just like a photograph. Yeah, then I'm not really saying much, right? I'm not really expressing more than that. If it looks just like a photograph, then why am I needed? We have the photograph. The photograph's beautiful. Okay, so that's why I do that. What are some other things that I was thinking about? Oh, one of the things that always helps me with proportions, because that's always the big thing with figures, is, oh my gosh, it doesn't look proportional. Like one thing is bigger than the other, or it doesn't look right in some way. I use the ever-present verticals and horizontals. I mean, it's just like a grid, but in your brain, right? So, for example, you know, I worked from left to right. I established the size of this arm, okay, and hand, and I was like, okay, that works pretty good. And this was pretty simple. And then I pretty much looked at, you know, visually looked at where the end of this shoulder is, like up here, and where the tip of the finger would fall within that. And it was pretty similar. Like if I drew a vertical, they would meet pretty much there. And so I was like, okay, that's how long the hand is from the wrist. Oh, where does the wrist end? If I drew a vertical, it would be a little bit right here within that arm. You know, so I'm kind of guessing, but getting a little bit closer by drawing verticals. Like how far from the left side is the shoulder? How far from the left side is the hand? Well, they're pretty much the same, you know, the tip there. You could do other things like measurement. Like you could do a measurement on your photo and go, okay, this is the width of the hand. It's the same as the width as the head. Oh, there you go. And then you can get kind of like a comparative measurement. You could do the same thing with horizontals. For example, where this back arm that you can barely see meets the front arm. Is that right? I think that angle's a bit off. Meets the front arm. Where that meets creates a nice little kind of targeting area, I guess. You know, it's like two places meet. You can almost put a point there. And then when I was over here working with the glutes, I wondered where this thigh started coming out from there. So I drew a horizontal, and it was pretty close with that. So I was like, okay, there it is. Found that location, then that can give me other things. You know, I was happy with the width of this thigh here, so I did comparative distance between that, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty close. Horizontals and verticals are super, super helpful for long distances. As I got to this point, so from the left of the image to the end of this glute, I was thinking, well, that's not halfway, because I'm looking at my image here. It's not 1/2 the total. I think that's the half, you know, I just did an eyeball on it. That's not, it doesn't meet 1/2 the whole picture plane, so it's a little bit less. Okay. That I kind of know where that hits. Well, how far does the toes come out? You know, this whole leg extend from there, right? And I could go back to the reference and measure, or, you know, on my pencil or something like that. This isn't long enough. I think I use my ruler. Like on the reference, I would measure from the end from the far left to where that glute ends, okay? And then go, okay, what is 2 times that? And it did equal right where the toes end. As you can see, my toes stick out a bit further than that. So it's not exact, but I don't think it looks bad. So I'm going back and forth on the reference, kind of figuring out distances and things like that. Another thing I was thinking about with, every time I draw the head, if you think about the head itself, like, oh man, can I do a Loomis head? It's been so long since I've done a Loomis head. So you draw a circle. There's a circle. Then what's next? Then you do the side of the head. Let's do similar to what I have here. So you do another circle plane that's indicating like the side of the head, okay? Then you figure out the center, you drop that off, and then you got the jawline that comes down, blah, 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 there. And then these lines to mean the brow, eye line, nose, mouth, you know, something like that. It's a really terrible Loomis head, but it's really nice to use that to kind of understand the form of the head, front plane, side plane, basically top plane, bottom plane, depending on, you know, the orientation of it. But the one thing I always come back to is if you're looking at a face or a head and you get an angle on the brow ridge, so brow ridge where these eyebrows are, okay? You get like this angle. Well, your eyes will follow that angle, the base of the nose will follow that angle, and then the lips will follow that angle, and then your chin will follow that angle. Like that angle tells the story for the whole front of the face, and you got to get all those angles on for the front of the face to look pretty good. And then the other thing I look for is the subtlety in shadows that tell you where the side of the face begins, especially right here, this point on the brow. It's right there. Tells you where things begin and end. Gives you a nice shape of that corner of the face. Now it's front, side. Anyway, there's so many better ways I could do a tutorial like that, not on this little crazy drawing. But anyway, I like to talk about art. Duh. I like to talk too much about art. Okay. Done for today. Just gotten the drawing done. I say just. I built a composition. I looked at a ton of images. I found what I'm interested in. And 4 days before that, I built the palette for this painting. And then today I built the composition, figured all this out. I'm happy with what I'm gonna do. I prepared the paper, cut out the paper, put the lines on it, did the drawing, and then that's it, you know. Oh my gosh, you're not going to paint today? No, that was a lot. Jeez. That was more than enough. That was hours of work. Okay, it's a Sunday. It's actually Easter today, so I can chill out the rest of the day because my art day is done. And it was a good day. All right, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about art today. Stay tuned for the next video, and I'm going to do one of two things. I'm going to either start drawing and fixing some things on here, or I'm just going to go straight in with paint. I'm not certain. We shall see. Bye-bye.